The twin suns of the distant planet Zyra were sinking behind jagged mountains, casting long, sharp shadows across the dusty plains. Alone in the cold, quiet world, a small alien orphan named Lyra shuffled along the cracked ground, her stomach twisting with hunger. She was smaller than most Syrian children, her greenish skin faintly glowing in the dim light, and her large, dark eyes scanned every rock and crevice for anything edible. The wind howled like a distant creature, carrying whispers of the unknown. Lyra's tiny hands clutched a small, tattered satchel that had been her mother's. It held almost nothing, some dried leaves, a few shriveled berries, but it was all she had left in the universe. She had learned to survive on almost nothing, but today her hunger felt sharper, more desperate. She glanced behind her. The mountains were empty, silent, but she could not shake the feeling that something watched. Her heartbeat quickened. The orphan had a secret. Though she often went without food, she never ate her share if she could help others. She had seen the weaker aliens in the nearby caves, small, frail, shivering, and she could not ignore them. "I have eaten before," she whispered to herself, pressing her stomach in silent protest. "They have not." Her eyes flickered toward the distant cave where the starving group hid. The thought of them going without food tonight made her chest ache more than her hunger ever could. The path to the cave was dangerous. Broken rocks and sudden drops littered the terrain, and predators often roamed these lands at night. Lyra moved carefully, her small feet leaving faint marks in the red dust. Every sound made her freeze, the snap of a branch, the rustle of a strange creature, even the sigh of the wind. The mountains were alive with threats, but she kept going. She would risk herself before letting others starve. Halfway to the cave, a shadow darted across her path. She froze. The shape was fast, too fast to be human or alien. Her mind raced. Was it a predator or something worse? She gripped her satchel tighter, knowing it contained the last food she could spare. Slowly, cautiously, she crept closer. Her breathing shallow. The shadow moved again, and this time she saw it. A scavenger. Larger than she had imagined, its glowing eyes reflecting the dying light of the twin suns. Lyra held her ground. She couldn't fight it, and yet she could not run without leaving the starving group behind, summoning every ounce of courage. She whispered a small, strange word her mother had taught her. The scavenger paused, tilting its head, confused. Slowly, it retreated into the darkness. Lyra exhaled, her heart pounding, her hands trembling. She had survived the first challenge, but the path was far from safe. Finally, she reached the entrance of the cave. Inside, she could hear faint noises, soft cries, low coughs, and the sound of tiny bodies shifting in the shadows. Her heart twisted with both fear and hope. Carefully, she opened her satchel and offered what little food she had. The small aliens inside gasped in surprise, their eyes lighting up with gratitude. She smiled faintly, even though her own stomach ached like never before. As the twin suns disappeared completely, darkness swallowed the land. The cave was safe for now, but Lyra knew danger was never far. Somewhere out there, eyes watched, creatures prowled, and survival was never guaranteed. Yet, despite her fear, despite her hunger, she felt a strange warmth. For the first time that day, she knew she had done the right thing. She had chosen to be more than an orphan. She had chosen to be a guardian, a small hero in a harsh universe. And, as the wind howled outside, carrying shadows and whispers, Lyra realized that her journey was only beginning. There were more challenges ahead, more dangers to face, and more lives to save. But for tonight, she had made a difference. And in the cold, lonely darkness of planet Zyra, that was enough. The cave was dim and quiet, lit only by a faint, greenish glow from the crystals embedded in the walls. Lyra sat on the cold stone floor, her stomach gnawing at her relentlessly, but she could not bring herself to eat. Around her, a small group of younger aliens huddled together, their eyes wide with hunger and fear. They were tiny, fragile beings, some barely able to move. Lyra's heart ached as she watched them. She opened her satchel slowly. Inside were a few dry leaves and the last of the berries she had scavenged that day. The small meal might barely fill her own belly, but she knew the group needed it more. Her hands shook slightly as she picked out the berries, placing them carefully in front of the youngest one. "I've eaten before," she whispered softly, "but you haven't." The youngest alien, a tiny creature with translucent skin and trembling limbs, looked at her in surprise. Its eyes widened, and it hesitated before picking up the berry. Slowly, carefully, it tasted it, then looked up at Lyra with a weak smile. The others followed, taking the leaves and berries one by one. Lyra watched silently, hiding the sharp pain in her stomach. She forced herself to smile, even as the hunger grew unbearable. Her body trembled, her head felt light, but her heart was full. There was a strange satisfaction in seeing the little ones eat. She had chosen their survival over her own comfort, and somehow it made her feel stronger. But the world outside the cave did not forgive weakness. The wind outside carried strange, slow growls, rustling in the distance and the echo of something massive moving across the rocky plains. Lyra's ears twitched. She knew she could not stay in the cave for long. The predators discovered her and the group. No amount of courage could save them. Her mind raced. How could she get more food without putting the small aliens in danger? She thought of the nearby ruins, abandoned for centuries, rumored to have hidden food supplies left by long-gone travelers. But to reach them, she would have to cross a narrow gorge, climb jagged cliffs, and move past predators hungry enough to sense her presence from miles away. Lyra's stomach twisted painfully. She wanted to scream, to cry, to eat something herself. But she pushed the hunger aside. She could survive longer. They could not. Gathering her courage, she whispered to the group, "I will go. Stay here. Be safe." The group looked at her with wide, frightened eyes. Some tried to protest, but she shook her head. "I am small, but I am stronger than I look. I will bring food back." With that, Lyra stood, her small frame trembling, but her determination shining bright. She stepped out of the cave and into the shadowed plains. The twin moons now hung low, casting an eerie light that made the rocks look like teeth ready to bite. Every step was a battle against the pain in her belly, every shadow a potential threat. Suddenly, a movement caught her eye, a large silhouette shifting in the darkness. Her heart jumped. A scavenger bigger than any she had faced before was watching her from the rocks. Its glowing eyes tracked her every move. Lyra froze, then remembered her mother's words. Courage is not the absence of fear, but moving forward despite it. With careful, slow steps, she moved past the creature, holding her breath. The ground beneath her feet was sharp and uneven. One wrong step could send her tumbling into the gorge below. But she did not stop. She could not stop. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she reached the ruins. The air was thick with dust, and broken walls loomed like silent giants. She scanned the area and spotted a small cache of dried rations hidden behind a collapsed wall. Relief surged through her, but she knew the journey back would be even harder. Clutching the rations tightly, she began the long trek home, each step heavier than the last. Hunger clawed at her stomach, fatigue weighed down her limbs, and the shadows of predators seemed closer than ever. Yet, with every painful step, she reminded herself, they need me. They deserve this more than I do. And so, under the pale glow of the moons, Lyra pressed forward, driven by a courage that was bigger than her tiny body and a heart that chose others before herself. She was more than an orphan. The night was darker than Lyra had ever seen. The twin moons had disappeared behind thick clouds, leaving the rocky plains of Zyra in complete shadow. Her small frame moved cautiously across the uneven ground, clutching the rations she had risked her life to find. Every step was painful. Her stomach screamed in protest, and her legs felt heavy, but she could not stop. The starving group back in the cave was counting on her, and she had promised herself she would not fail them. The terrain was treacherous. Jagged rocks jutted out like broken teeth, and deep crevices threatened to swallow her if she misstepped. One false move could end her journey in an instant. She carefully placed each foot, testing the ground before stepping, her hands brushing against rough walls of stone for balance. Every sound, the hiss of wind, the distant rumble of falling. Rocks made her heart leap. Then she heard it, a low growl that made her blood freeze. From the shadows, a predator emerged, larger than any scavenger she had faced before. Its eyes glowed like molten gold, and its claws scraped against the stones, sending sparks into the darkness. Lyra froze, her mind racing. There was nowhere to hide, no place to run without risking the rations. She gripped the bundle tightly to her chest. The predator sniffed the air and growled again, inching closer. Lyra remembered the stories her mother had told her, tales of clever, small aliens who survived against all odds. She took a deep breath, forcing her fear down, and slowly reached into her satchel. From its depths, she pulled a small, reflective shard, a piece of crystal from the cave. With a quick flick of her wrist, she threw it across the ground. The shard sparkled in the faint moonlight, catching the predator's attention. The creature paused, distracted by the sudden light, and Lyra took a careful step backward. Step by step, she managed to put distance between herself and the predator. It growled one last time, then retreated into the shadows. Lyra exhaled shakily, her chest heaving, but she did not stop. She could not afford to. Every second wasted meant the group back in the cave remained hungry and weak. Hours passed, and the ground grew rougher. She had to climb steep cliffs and balance along narrow ledges. Her hands bled from scraping against sharp rocks, and her legs ached as if they were filled with stone. Hunger clawed at her insides, but she ignored it, focusing only on the path. Ahead, each step was a test of her strength and willpower, and she forced herself to keep moving, repeating the words that kept her alive. They need me. I must not fail. Suddenly, the wind shifted, carrying with it a strange, almost metallic scent. Lyra's eyes narrowed. Something moved in the shadows ahead, something large, unnatural. She crouched low, pressing herself against the rocks, listening. Her heart pounded as the movement drew closer. Then she saw it, a scavenger pack, 3 massive creatures moving silently, their eyes glowing with hunger. There was no way through without being seen. Lyra's mind raced. She could not outrun them. She was too small, too weak. She scanned the ground and spotted a narrow fissure in the rocks, a tiny crack that the predators would be too large to enter. She ran, careful not to make a sound, and squeezed herself into the fissure, the sharp edges scraping her skin. Her breath came in ragged gasps as the scavengers passed by, growling and sniffing the air, unable to reach her. When the danger passed, Lyra crawled out of the fissure, shaken but alive. She looked down at the rations clutched to her chest and whispered, "Almost there. Just a little more." The cave was still far away, the path dangerous, but she had survived the deadliest part of the journey. Her courage had carried her this far, and she knew it would carry her the rest of the way. Finally, just before dawn, the first light of the twin suns broke through the clouds. Lyra could see the cave in the distance, tiny and fragile against the mountains, but alive with hope. Her legs shook with exhaustion, her stomach a hollow ache, but she smiled faintly. She had risked everything to bring food to those who could not feed themselves. Lyra pressed on, each step a testament to her bravery, each breath a reminder of her mission. The dangerous journey was not over, but she had proven to herself that even a small, hungry alien could face impossible odds and survive. And in the heart of the dark, lonely plains of Zyra, hope moved forward with her. Lyra's small body trembled with exhaustion as she neared the familiar cave where the starving group waited. Her legs ached, her stomach growled painfully, and every step felt heavier than the last. Yet, in the distance, the cave's shadowy entrance gave her hope. Almost home, almost safe. But Zyra had other plans. A sudden roar tore through the air, louder and more terrifying than anything Lyra had heard before. The ground beneath her shook, and dust and pebbles rained down from the cliffs above. Lyra froze, her eyes widening in panic. The roar came again, this time closer, more furious. She spun around, her heart hammering. Emerging from the shadows was a massive creature unlike any she had ever seen. Its skin was dark and scaly, with jagged spikes running down its spine. Its glowing eyes burned like coals, and its claws dug into the rocks as it stalked toward her. Lyra's mind raced. This was no scavenger. This was something far deadlier, an apex predator, a nightmare come to life. Her first instinct was to run, but she knew that any sudden move could trigger a chase, and she could not risk the rations. The starving group depended on them. Every ounce of courage she had must hold steady. She ducked behind a jagged rock, pressing herself against the cold surface. The creature sniffed the air, growling low in a sound that shook her bones. Its eyes scanned the plain, and for a terrifying moment, Lyra thought it had spotted her. She held her breath, praying the shadows would hide her. Then the creature let out a deafening roar and lunged forward, shattering the rock beside her. Lyra screamed quietly, scrambling backward, her small hands scraping against stone. She needed a plan, and fast, remembering the reflective crystal she had used before. Lyra reached into her satchel. Her fingers trembled as she pulled it out. She could not throw it carelessly. The creature was far too intelligent to be tricked so easily. Slowly, carefully, she placed it in a small indentation on the rock ledge, angling it toward the monster. Then she dashed around the side, hoping it would notice the gleam and follow the false trail. The creature paused, its glowing eyes locking on the crystal. It hissed and snarled, confusion flashing across its massive face. Lyra risked a glance. It was working. The predator turned toward the crystal, and she seized the moment. Sprinting as fast as her tired legs would allow, she clutched the rations tightly and leaped across a narrow fissure in the rocks. Pain shot through her arms and legs, but she did not stop as she ran. Another danger appeared, a swarm of tiny flying predators, their translucent wings buzzing like knives in the night. Lyra dodged and ducked, twisting through the rocky terrain, her heart pounding in her ears. One scrape of a wing, one bite, and it could end her journey. But she forced herself onward, her eyes locked on the cave that now seemed closer than ever. Finally, she reached a flat ledge overlooking the cave entrance. From here, she could see the small group inside, huddled together, weak but alive. Relief washed over her, but there was no time to celebrate. The massive predator had noticed her again. Its roar echoed across the mountains, and it began to descend toward her, slower this time, but deliberate and deadly. Lyra's mind raced. The ledge was too narrow to run, the rations were too precious to drop, and the creature would not give up. Her only choice was to face it. She remembered the stories her mother told her. Bravery is not the absence of fear, but the choice to act despite it. Clutching the rations, Lyra stood her ground. She whispered softly to herself, "I cannot fail them. I will not fail them." With one deep breath, she prepared to act, ready to use every trick, every ounce of courage to protect the food and reach the cave safely. Above her, the twin moons began to peek through the clouds, casting a faint silver light across the ledge. Lyra's shadow stretched long and small, but inside it burned something far greater than her size, a determination and bravery that not even the deadliest predator could crush. And in that moment, as the creature lunged, the real test of her courage and her heart. The cave was silent when Lyra finally crawled inside, her small body trembling from exhaustion. The rations were clutched tightly to her chest, her hands sore and fingers scraped from the treacherous journey. Her stomach screamed in protest, but she ignored it. For the first time in hours, she could see the little aliens she had promised to feed. Their eyes widened as they saw her emerge from the darkness, carrying what seemed like a treasure. "Food," one whispered, weak and trembling. Their voices were soft, fragile, barely audible over the crackling of the cave walls. Lyra nodded, her face pale but determined. She set the rations down gently and motioned for the group to gather around. Every leaf, every berry, was placed carefully in the middle. The smallest one, a tiny alien with translucent skin and quivering limbs, stepped forward first. Its eyes shone with hope as it reached for a leaf. Lyra watched quietly, hiding the sharp pang of hunger in her own stomach. She could barely remember the last time she had eaten anything substantial herself, but that did not matter. Tuni. Their survival came first. Slowly, the others began to eat. Soft murmurs of gratitude filled the cave, mixed with the occasional cough or sigh of relief. Lyra sat back on the cold stone floor, exhausted, yet her heart swelled with a strange warmth. She had risked everything to get here, faced deadly predators, harsh terrain, and her own relentless hunger, and now she could see the fruits of her courage. Yet, as the group ate, Lyra noticed something unusual. One of the older aliens, sitting slightly apart, coughed violently and leaned against the cave wall. Its breathing was shallow, and its skin seemed paler than the others. Alarm shot through Lyra's chest. Hunger was one thing, but sickness was another. She had to act fast. "Here," she whispered, offering some berries. The sick alien shook its head weakly. Lyra pressed gently. "You need this. You will not survive without it." Hesitantly, the alien took a few berries, chewing slowly. Lyra stayed close, encouraging them softly, whispering words of comfort and hope. The cave, once silent and filled with despair, now hummed with life and gratitude. Small smiles appeared on weary faces. Tiny hands clutched leaves and berries with care, sharing them amongst the group. Lyra felt her own energy return slightly, not from the food she had eaten none, but from seeing hope restored in those around her. Outside, the winds of Zyra continued to howl, carrying shadows and whispers across the plains. But inside the cave, there was a fragile warmth, a light that could not be extinguished by darkness or danger. Lyra had faced countless perils to reach this moment, and now, for the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to breathe. Yet, the world was never truly safe. Lyra knew the predators were still out there, waiting, and the terrain remained harsh and unyielding. But in this small cave, she had made a difference. She had turned despair into hope. Her selflessness had kept the weakest alive through one long, cruel night. As the small group finished the rations, they looked at Lyra with awe and gratitude. Their eyes spoke without words. "You risked everything for us." Lyra's chest swelled with quiet pride. She had no desire for praise, no wish for reward, only the knowledge that they would survive another day. Finally, as she sat in the dim glow of the cave crystals, Lyra allowed herself a moment of rest. Her stomach growled, her body ached, but she smiled faintly. This was the price she willingly paid. She had fed others before herself, sacrificed comfort and safety for hope. And in that sacrifice, she had found a strength far greater than hunger or fear. For tonight, the cave was filled not with despair, but with life. And Lyra, the lonely alien orphan, had shown that even the smallest being could make a heroic difference. She had faced the darkness outside and the hunger within, and she had emerged as a guardian of hope for those who needed it most. The cave was quiet now, but the air was thick with tension. Lyra sat huddled near the group, her small body trembling. From exhaustion, she had faced predators, climbed cliffs, and endured her own relentless hunger, all to bring food to the starving aliens. Yet, as she looked around, she realized that her sacrifice had not ended. One of the older aliens, the one who had been sick before, was growing weaker by the hour. Its breathing was shallow, and even the tiny rations she had brought were barely enough to keep it alive. Lyra's stomach growled loudly, reminding her of the food she had yet to eat, but she ignored it. Her own survival no longer mattered. Every fiber of her being focused on the weak alien in front of her. She opened her satchel once more, pulling out the last remaining food. Only a few berries and dried leaves remained barely, enough to sustain one life, but that one life mattered more than hers. "I will not eat," she whispered to herself. "I will give it to you. I will save you." The sick alien looked at her with wide, fearful eyes. It seemed to understand, in a way words could not express, that Lyra's act was more than kindness. It was love, courage, and hope, all wrapped into one fragile, glowing alien. Trembling, it reached out, taking the berries with a shaky hand. Lyra smiled faintly, hiding the sharp pang of hunger that twisted her stomach. The hours passed slowly. Lyra watched as the sick alien slowly ate, its body regaining a faint glow. The other small aliens clustered around, their eyes bright with hope and gratitude. They looked at her with awe, as if they could sense the sacrifice she was making. And yet, Lyra felt her own energy fading. Her limbs were heavy, her head spun, and a deep exhaustion settled into her bones. Hunger and fatigue gnawed at her relentlessly, but she would not yield suddenly. A distant roar echoed through the cave entrance. The predators from the plains had tracked her scent. Lyra's heart raced. She had risked everything to come here. And now the danger had found them again. She could flee, but she could not leave the group unprotected. Her mind raced for a solution. Then she saw it, the narrow fissure near the back of the cave. It was small, almost too small for the predators, but she could lure them toward it. Her small frame was perfect for slipping through, but the others could not follow. Lyra realized what she had to do. The predator would be drawn to her scent, and she could buy the group more time. "I will be fine," she whispered to the small aliens, even though she felt her strength leaving her. "Stay here, be safe." Clutching her satchel, she stepped toward the cave entrance. The ground shook as the predator approached, its glowing eyes piercing through the shadows. Lyra's heart raced, but she did not falter. She ran toward the fissure, careful to lead the predator's attention away from the group. Her steps were slow, deliberate, calculated. Every ounce of her small body screamed in protest, but she could not stop. The predator lunged, and Lyra slipped through the fissure just in time. Its massive claws scratched at the rocks behind her, missing her by inches. She scrambled through the narrow space, feeling the walls scrape against her skin. Pain shot through her arms and legs, but she did not scream. She could hear the predator roaring in frustration outside, unable to reach her. Finally, she emerged. On the other side of the cave, exhausted, bruised, and nearly fainting. She looked back toward the group. The predator had been diverted. The small aliens were safe, the sick alien was slowly recovering, and her mission had succeeded. Her body trembled with fatigue and hunger, but her heart swelled with pride. She had given everything, even herself, to save others. As she collapsed to the ground, she whispered to herself, "I have fed them. I have protected them. I am enough." In that moment, Lyra realized the true meaning of heroism. It was not about power, size, or strength. It was about putting others before yourself, even when the cost was everything. And in the cave, filled with faint light and soft, grateful murmurs, Lyra's small body rested, knowing that she had given hope to those who needed it most. Even in the vast, harsh universe of Zyra, one small being's courage could change. The first light of Zyra's twin suns spilled over the rocky plains, casting soft, golden hues across the cave entrance. Inside, the small group of aliens stirred, their bodies stronger, their eyes brighter. Lyra lay in a corner, exhausted, bruised, and trembling, but a faint smile lingered on her lips. She had survived the night, survived the hunger, survived the predators, and, most importantly, she had saved the lives of those who had nothing but hope. The youngest of the group crawled over to her, tiny hands pressing against her arm. You saved us," it whispered, voice trembling with awe. Lyra reached out, brushing its small fingers gently. She did not speak. 4 words could not express the quiet pride that swelled inside her chest. Instead, she simply nodded, letting the moment speak for itself. As the sun climbed higher, more light filtered into the cave. Shadows that had once felt threatening now softened, revealing the small group in detail. They huddled together, healthy and safe, their eyes scanning for Lyra, their guardian. She had given everything, her food, her energy, her safety, to ensure their survival. And in return, she felt something she had never known in her lonely life: respect, gratitude, and a quiet sense of purpose. Outside the cave, the winds of Zyra had calmed. The predators were gone, driven off by the clever diversion Lyra had set. The mountains, once harsh and menacing, now seemed almost peaceful in the warm morning light. Lyra's gaze lingered on the horizon, where the twin suns reflected off distant crystal cliffs. She felt small, almost insignificant in the vast universe, but she also felt powerful because she had made a difference. The sick alien, now regaining strength, stood slowly and walked toward her. I thought I would not see the sun again," it said softly, voice weak but filled with hope. Lyra shook her head gently. "You will see it every day," she replied, her own voice soft. "You all will." The group gathered closer, surrounding her, and for the first time, Lyra felt truly connected. They were no longer just creatures she helped. They were her family, her purpose. Time passed slowly in the cave, filled with soft laughter, whispers of gratitude, and shared stories. Lyra listened quietly, her body still weak, her stomach still empty, but her spirit soaring. She realized that heroism was not about glory or recognition, was about giving when it mattered most, even if no one else saw. She had fed them, protected them, and given them hope. In return, she had found something she had been missing all her life: belonging. As the suns rose higher, Lyra ventured outside the cave. The plains stretched endlessly before her, jagged rocks, crystal cliffs, and vast deserts all shimmering. In the morning light, she paused and took a deep breath, feeling the warmth on her skin. For a moment, she allowed herself to imagine a future one where she could continue helping others. Traveling across Zyra, bringing hope to the hopeless, feeding the hungry, protecting the weak. The small aliens followed her outside, their steps tentative but growing stronger. Together, they stood on the edge of the cave, looking out at the vast, harsh, beautiful world before them. And Lyra knew, deep inside, that no matter how small she felt, no matter how lonely she had once been, her courage, selflessness, and heart had created ripples far beyond herself. Finally, she knelt down, letting the little ones climb onto her shoulders and rest beside her. "We survived," she whispered, her voice calm but firm. "And together, we will survive again." The group nodded, their eyes bright, their bodies strong, and their hearts filled with hope. And in that quiet golden morning, on a harsh planet far from anywhere else in the universe, Lyroth, the lonely alien orphan who had once starved herself, smiled, fully for the first time. She had given her all to save others, and the universe, in its own small way, had rewarded her. Heroism, she realized, was not measured by strength or size, but by the courage to care, even when the cost was everything. The cave was no longer a place of fear. It was a place of hope. And Lyra, small and fragile, but mighty in heart, had become its guardian. The first rays of Zyra's twin suns pierced through the jagged rocks, painting the cave entrance with a soft golden glow. Inside, the small alien stirred, blinking sleepily and stretching stiff limbs. Lyra sat quietly in a corner, her body aching, her stomach hollow, yet her heart was strangely light. She had survived the darkness, the hunger, and the predators, and, in doing so, she had given life and hope to those who had none. The youngest alien crawled over to her, its tiny hands brushing against her arm. "You saved us," it whispered, voice fragile but full of wonder. Lyra smiled faintly, hiding the sharp pang of hunger and the bruises that marked her body. Words were not needed. The look in their eyes, the mix of gratitude, awe, and trust said everything. She had become more than a stranger to them. She was their protector, their guardian. The older alien, who had been sick, stood slowly, leaning on the smaller ones for support. Its skin glimmered faintly under the soft light of the crystals embedded in the cave walls, a sign that the last of the rations had strengthened it. I thought I wouldn't live another day," it said softly. Lyra shook her head. "You will," she replied simply, her voice calm but firm. "All of you will." For the first time, the cave felt alive with warmth. The creatures who had been pale, weak, and despairing were now smiling, sharing small pieces of food and speaking in quiet voices filled with hope. Lyra watched them, her tired eyes reflecting pride and relief. She had risked everything, her own hunger, her safety, her comfort, and yet she felt more alive than ever. Outside, the plains of Zyra stretched endlessly, dangerous and harsh, yet beautiful in the morning light. The mountains glowed faintly, and the twin suns shimmered on distant crystal cliffs. Lyra stepped outside, the rations gone, but her purpose clear. She could see the small group following her, each step more confident than the last. They were no longer helpless. They were alive because she had chosen to act, to risk herself for others. She paused and looked toward the horizon. The predator from the night before was gone, perhaps searching elsewhere, but she felt no fear. Not anymore. She had faced the deadliest threats Zyra could offer, and she had survived. Her courage, her cleverness, and her unwavering determination had carried her through. The group gathered around her, their small hands pressing against her shoulders, their eyes shining with something they could not put into words. Lyra knelt to meet them at eye level, letting their presence wash over her like a warm, comforting wave. "We made it," she whispered, voice soft but strong. "We survived, and together we will survive again." For a long moment, the cave was filled with silence, broken only by the quiet rustle of wings and the distant wind outside. Then small voices began to speak soft stories, small laughter, words of hope. Lyra listened, feeling a calm she had never known before. Her journey had not been easy, but every step, every risk, every sacrifice had been worth it, she realized. As she looked at their faces, that heroism was not measured by size, power, or fame. It was measured by the willingness to act, to care, and to sacrifice when it mattered most. Her small, fragile body had carried more than food, it had carried courage, hope, and life itself. And in return, She had received something no predator or hunger could take. Belonging as the suns rose higher, Lyra felt a spark of determination flicker within her. The universe was vast, full of danger, and yet full of life in need of protection. Perhaps her story would not end here. Perhaps there were others who needed her courage, her heart, her selflessness. But for now, the cave was safe, the group was alive, and hope had been restored. And in that quiet, golden morning, on a distant, harsh planet, Lee Roth, the lonely alien orphan who had once starved herself to feed others, smiled fully for the first time. Her sacrifices had not been in vain. She had become more than an orphan. She had become a hero, a guardian of life, and a beacon of hope in a universe that so often seemed